Reddit, what random act of kindness motivated you to pay it forward? 19 years old, incredibly sketch looking, long hair, beard, piercings, the works, and I was with my best friend on a trip to New York from Vancouver, Canada. We were staying in Times Square but we went to a concert in Long Island and ended up taking really late transit home. Enter the Crawheads. A man and a woman clearly addicted to drugs get on the train and sit across from my scrawny pale friend and my equally scrawny white self and start to inexplicably pick a fight with us, accusing us of making fun of them or something. I don't know. Probably just an excuse to beat the crap out of us and maybe take whatever we have on us. The man becomes physically threatening when out of nowhere, an exceptionally large, probably 400 pounds plus, black man with a thick New York accent says, "Out of the way, fatty needs a seat," to me, temporarily defusing the situation. He then proceeds to pull jawbreakers out of his pocket and hands them to my friend and I while telling a story of the jawbreakers he used to steal from kids at school. When the Crawhead gets belligerent again, the huge dude instantly changes the topic to his current bodyguard job and tells stories of smashing people's faces into cement walls and putting bad people into the hospital. The Crawhead shut the frick up and got his girlfriend off of the train at the next stop, and we rode the rest of the way back to the hotel with this awesome dude talking about our favorite candies and the fastest ways to get to the center of a jawbreaker. Very welcoming first night in New York. TLDR. Crawhead threatens me. Out of towner. On subway. Massive black bodyguard feeds me candy. Protects me from Crawhead. Massive black bodyguard feeds me candy. Protects me from Crawhead. My favorite TLDR of the day. When I was younger I had abusive parents, like really abusive parents. One night in the middle of a snowstorm they threw me outside in the snow with no shoes or socks and in a shirt. It was freezing cold. I was wandering around the neighborhood behind the houses because I was too embarrassed. Suddenly, a neighbor of mine, 17ish, was sitting on his window smoking and looking at the snow. He saw me, asked what the heck I was doing. I just gave him this look and he leaned out his window, grabbed me by the arms and hauled me up into his window. He gave me some blankets and let me sit there in the warmth for a while and we just small talked and he put on a movie. A little while later my mother came by, saw him and asked if he had seen me. He instantly, without hesitating, told her no, and watched until she left before helping me back home. At the time, it was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for me, the only person who had ever protected me from my abusive parents. Since then I've always been doing my best to help my friends and acquaintances from their abusive families or relationships. TLDR. It can feel so alone being in an abusive situation, and the feeling of having someone protect you never goes away. Pay that crap forward. When I was in 8th grade, my mother tried to end her life for the first time and I was too ashamed to tell anyone. What I did do was write what happened into the last paragraph of an English essay I turned in later that year. My teacher, who I wasn't particularly close to, pulled me aside after reading the essay and held me as I cried for about an hour. It was extremely cathartic. I never told her anything more that happened and she never asked. She moved away from my school district the next year and I have always regretted not staying in touch with her because she saved me from what could have been a very dark spiral. Teachers really do help. A few years back I ran out of a classroom crying because my mum was talking about ending her life. I smack right into the technology teacher, beast of a man, ex-marine etc. He sits with me whilst I cry my eyes out and tell him everything. That meant so much to me and I have always been grateful. I actually did that same thing for a girl at a bar once because some really drunk dude was trying to drag her out the back door into the alley. The kicker here is that I'm also a chick, straight and married, but I know what it looks like when a girl is in trouble. I was heading to the back where the bathrooms were and saw her struggling with this slobbering dude. She also seemed like she was too scared to scream or really put up a fight, so I went up, grabbed her hand, pulled her towards me and palmed the guy hard in the diaphragm. Since he was so drunk, he immediately fell over. The girl gave me a full body hug and ran in the opposite direction towards a bouncer. Dude got immediately escorted out and into the hands of some nearby cops. Apparently this wasn't the first time this guy had done this to random girls at the bars, but hopefully it was his last. I didn't have the best childhood. My adoptive father has some unconventional parenting methods, and so I used to cry a lot. On one such occasion I was sitting on a park bench, crying softly to myself. I was trying to be discreet, but I couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 at the time. An old lady sat at the other end of the bench and we sat in relative silence for a few minutes. I would sniffle occasionally, but I was trying to be quiet. She clearly noticed me wiping my eyes and asked me if I was okay. I told her I was, but she insisted on taking me to a nearby coffee cart and buying me a cup of hot chocolate. It was winter. It was the nicest thing she could have done for me, and it was really nice to know that someone cared. I was in a foreign country, so I didn't have a car, and it was a weekend of a public holiday, so there was very little public transportation. A friend and I had gone to explore the city, managed to walk quite a distance from our hotel. While we were out, over an hour away, it started raining harder than I remember seeing. It was gorgeous when we left, but ridiculously cold and rainy on the way back. My buddy had brought a coat, but I was in a t-shirt. A lady walking down the street towards us with her umbrella stopped me and insisted I take her umbrella. I tried to refuse, but she insisted, telling me that her place was just around the corner. I was already drenched, but it sure did help to walk the remaining several miles with an umbrella instead just my t-shirt. I try to pay it forward by being generous whenever I have something I don't need, rather than just repaying the one event. I want to be the kind of person that lady was. A fantastic philosophy. I was an exchange student in Japan. My friends and I were visiting Kobe for the weekend. Of the three of us, I spoke the most Japanese, but even that was intermediate level at the very best. Predictably, we got lost. It was late and cold and we had nowhere to stay, hadn't booked a room or anything. We were passing a karaoke place. It's pretty common for someone to be standing outside of these places yelling about deals and shoving flyers at you. We were so desperate at this point that I asked the guy for help finding a place to stay. He tried to describe a place, but even though I could understand most of what he said, we didn't have a map, smartphones, or know any street names, so his directions were useless. The guy paused, looked around, and then started running, waving for us to follow. He personally led 3 foreigners who had no intention of spending money at his karaoke place through the streets at night, apparently at great risk to himself because he seemed absurdly panicked about getting back to his job quickly. Even though he took us right to the door of a place where we could stay, we collected every yen we had and shoved it at the guy, but he threw up his hands, seemed aghast, and wouldn't accept a dime. Figuratively speaking, I encountered some racist crap in Japan, but this guy made up for all of it. TLDR. Guy put his job on the line to help a bunch of foreigners gibbering at him in awful, broken Japanese. When I was getting off the bus in high school, some D-bag motorist decided he didn't want to wait behind the bus, so he tried passing on the left. I should have been hit, but right before some guy getting into his car whistled at me, I stopped and turned around to see who it was. That gesture probably saved me from being destroyed. I would have been hit. I almost never break stride when I look towards some sound. One grocery week when I was in college, I had my card declined. This was a bit of a problem as the kitchen was entirely out of food and I wasn't going to be paid for another week. It was a really awkward being at the front of the line with $100 worth of groceries, having a hasty conversation with my girlfriend about how we were going to deal with this. Well, the guy behind us in line offered to pay for our groceries. I tried to talk him down, but he insisted and I was feeling really awkward holding up the line. I thanked him profusely and he told me word for word, just pay it forward if you ever get the chance. Ever since, I've been jamming $1 or $2 into every donation box I see, tipping an extra 5%, giving my change to the homeless, and otherwise looking for opportunities to pay it forward. I was 15 and I owned a moped. It was late and raining and this car did not see me as it turned left across my lane. I was T-boned going about 30 miles per hour. The car hit me right in my left thigh and my upper body hit and rebounded off of the hood. I flew maybe 20 feet before hitting the pavement. My left thigh snapped in two when the car hit me. I'm laying on the ground screaming for help when this guy comes up and kneels down with a knee on either side of my head so I can't move it around. He does his best to keep me calm and keep the rain off of me until the EMS guys show up and put me in traction and take me to the hospital. During that time the guy is asking me my name and address, making sure I'm coherent. After they took me away he drove to my parents' house and informed them that I was in an accident and mostly okay and that they should go to the hospital to see me. He wanted to make sure they got there as soon as possible and thought it would be less jarring than the police showing up at their door. I never got a chance to thank him either, but I think about him and his kindness from time to time. I hope one day I can do something similar for someone in distress. TL. DR. Hit by a car. Random man sits with me and then tells my parents what happened. Met a guy on the train to East Germany. We ended up partying the night away, becoming good friends, and I spent Christmas with him, his family, and his ridiculously hot GF. That was the last good meal I had before we deployed to the Gulf. I remember being blown away by how gracious and kind his parents were toward me. Plus, he bought me a new Kids on the Block Christmas album. It was such a catastrophically poor gift, but the thought was there. So now I always invite friends over for holidays. Try to go overboard on gifts to friends. Thanks Trorston. Pro writing tip for reader safety. Do not write. I remember being blown away immediately after. That was the last good meal I had before we deployed to the Gulf. Back when I was going to the local community college, I saw this girl outside of one of the classrooms having a serious breakdown. She was crying, holding her phone in one hand, and pacing back and forth nervously. Out of the blue, while I was walking on my way to class, I said, "You look like you need a hug." She was stopped pacing and stared at me for a bit, then gave one of the most desperate hugs I have ever received. Afterwards I asked her if there was anything I could do and she said that she was having a panic attack and just wanted to go home. The problem was that her purse and all of her books were still in the classroom. I offered to go in and get them for her, and her eyes widened like I had just saved her life. So I opened the door and the whole room turned to me. The teacher looked at me with this super skeptical look and asked, "Can I help you?" As I hadn't really thought it through, I told the first lie that popped into my head. My sister isn't feeling well, so I came by to pick up her things. He just stared at me for a while and pointed at an empty desk. I tried my best to pretend like I wasn't surprised by the purse and her other belongings, and then walked out of the room and handed her her things. She thanked me profusely, and I told her to just take the night off and relax. I never told her my name, and she never told me hers, but to this day there are few things that make me more proud than that random act of kindness. This story is going to sound pretty lame compared to other stories in this thread, but I'll tell it anyway. In middle school I went to my first dance. I was so terrified to ask a girl to dance. I just felt so awkward. Then one of my female classmates, her name was Mary, came and asked me to dance. She said she could tell I wasn't having fun and wanted to help me enjoy myself. It turned the whole experience around, and I was so happy. I felt so much better about myself after that. From that point onwards I always try to make dances, parties, shindigs fun for someone who looks miserable. It doesn't have to be a girl. I'll try and strike up a conversation with anyone. Once someone starts feeling at ease, they usually loosen up and start enjoying themselves. It doesn't always work, but I always give it a shot. My so at the time has a decent walk from the subway every night. On her way home she notices these two sketchy dudes following her. She hopes that she is just paranoid, but nonetheless continues to walk at a faster pace, and she barely has time to look back a second time that one of the guys has grabbed her purse strap and the other has her grocery bags. She starts yelling at the top of her lungs. From across the street, second floor, she hears, "Hey you suckers, what the frick you doing? I'ma frick you guys up." Out runs this shoeless, shirtless, long-haired metalhead with an electric guitar that he is swinging like Conan the Barbarian. Two-handed overhead helicopter swings would be the best description, and he is screaming like Braveheart or something similar. The two thugs must have seen the crazed look in this guy's eyes, but they bolted real fast. Upon my GF's return home, she explains what had happened. "I had to go and thank this guy in person and shake his hand for being badass and avoiding what I assume could have been a tragedy. We actually became friends and went to see a couple live gigs together. Lamb of God in Parkway Drive. I have since done many good deeds with this chivalrous story in mind, and I look forward to my chance to threaten to beat someone with a guitar." As a fellow metalhead, this made my day. My first weekend of college, my friends and I ended up at a party in an apartment. I made a dumb move and took a drink from a guy I just met. A few minutes later I was sitting on the stairs starting to fall asleep. A nice Jewish boy, wearing a yarmulke, saw that something was wrong with me, gave his number to my roommate and walked me home. He said that he recognized what was happening to me as a sign of a possible date drugging, and he didn't want me to be a victim because it had happened to his sister. TLDR. I got drugged at a party and a nice Jewish boy walked me home. What a mensch. Mine sounds ridiculous, but this bloke genuinely saved my life. I was very young, probably about 4 or 5, and my parents were about to take me out on my first tricycle. I was sat just outside the gate to my house waiting for my parents when I had a scumbag brain moment. Hey Rael, my brain said, yo Mr. Mozo, you should totally just lift up your feet. Just lift them up. I did. I should probably mention that my house is on a very steep hill which leads directly down to a very busy road. It might also help to mention that the wee tricycle had no brakes of any kind. So pretty soon I was shooting down the hill like nobody's business, straight towards the road. I was too frightened to even think straight. My parents were running after me screaming put your feet down, but I was going too fast. I couldn't hear them and they couldn't keep up with me. Just a few meters from the road, a builder, I think he was a builder but it was a while ago, was loading up his van. He looked up and saw me. Without a word he gracefully strode onto the pavement, and as I passed he swiftly and elegantly reached out, grabbed me and lifted me from the tricycle, which then rolled over. He set me down on the ground, closed his van, jumped into the front and drove off. Neither me nor my parents ever got to thank him. TLDR. Anonymous builder lifts me, soiled pants and all, from possessed tricycle headed for certain fairly probable quite likely possible death or at least mild injury, then disappears into the night and the middle of the day. Best TLDR I've ever encountered. You have been visited by the winged Huzzah in your darkest hour. When you are under siege and the battle seems lost, he will arrive and save you. If you comment keep fighting, Papa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.